Realty Trader Talk. Welcome to the podcast where business meets mindset through purpose, testimonials, and redemption. Sponsored by RealtyTrader.com. Today's guest is Richie Colletti, the owner of Leakbusters Roofing. Richie, tell me a little bit about you. Are you from Florida?
Well, first off, thanks for having me, Jordan.
Oh, hey. Well, you know what? Yeah, thank you.
Applaud. So no, I'm not originally from Florida. I'm from New York. That's how I got the fast-paced mindset that I got going on, and that's what has actually helped me excel in life a little bit more around here. I came to a slow town with the fast pace, and, that's how you excel a little bit,
You brought it down with
I brought it down. I don't like to admit to too many people that that I'm from New York. It's kind of a bad stigma around here now. I was here before all the people in Port St. Lucie, so don't hold that against me. I was the only New Yorker for a while when I moved down here, around 8 or 9 years old, which was 20 years ago. And as far as entrepreneurial start, I started entrepreneurial real young in school. Like, I figured out that, like, if I could take my lunch money and stop at A&M Discount over on Delaware Avenue before school and buy the 25-cent boxes of candy and bring them to school, that they were worth $1, because there was no A&M Discount that you can get to through at the lunchroom or nothing like that.
Right.
It's just the square pizzas or the octagon pizza, which I love the octagon pizza. So I started selling candy and, different stuff like that. And then later on, got into the pharmaceutical sales by about 12, learned my weights and measures there. I learned how to count money and do different things like that. And, I've just been in sales and everything since I was, young kid, so I think my first box of candy I sold at like 8 years old.
That's amazing. I identify in the same way. I have a good friend who is a commercial agent who likes to tell a story when we went to, it wasn't 8. It was a little later in the game, but I think it was in like maybe 6th grade or something, about selling candy. I did the same thing. It definitely must be an entrepreneurial thing to do that. I also can identify with the pharmaceuticals, except mine was in 10th grade, and that was my first time with my mistakes that I've made. So I can identify. So with the entrepreneurial spirit, when you started roofing, did you start your own business, or were you working with a company, or how did that happen?
No, so my father and uncle and my brother all had a roofing company together in New York when I was real young, 9, 10, 11 years. They had it before I was, 10. They both, my whole family was all in construction. My grandfather was a builder and stuff like that. So I used to go to work with them on the weekends and summer. That was basically what I did. I went and, I carried shingles up. I used to start it out carrying like a half a bundle up, and then they used to let me just nail the ends of the shingles, so I could learn how to, we used to hand nail. We didn't have guns back in the Stone Ages when I started. And I kind of loved the trade because it was different scenery every day, turned on the radio, hung out, laughed and joked, and, it was just kind of fun. It was a hustle and bustle and, a very active industry. Back in the day, they would get done working. We'd go barbecue every day and, and have fun. They were drinking beers. I was drinking root beers until I was like 12. So they used to send me to the cooler to get a beer. I would drink one on the way back. That's how my alcoholism started, but that's a whole different story for another day. But yeah, I just kind of fell in love with the industry and learned my way up. I eventually started my own company in New York when I was about, I think, right around 20 years old. I went back. I was down here for a little bit. I used to go up there in the summer times and work all the time. And then finally, like when I was about 19, I decided I needed to get back to my roots in New York, which I found out later on real soon that my roots suck. So yeah, then I was working for my uncle for a little while, and, he still had a 1970s mindset, and he thought $1 was worth $100. And, I quickly learned that, like, I could make a little bit more money by, going and doing this on my own. So I started my first roofing company then, had no idea anything about business. All I knew how to do was do the roof. I didn't even know how to sell a roof. All I knew was, like, how much money I was making. I doubled that, and then I was selling roofs for that cost plus material, So I was literally doing roofing for, $200 a day. I'd go do somebody's roof. And then, obviously that business didn't stick around too long. I came down here and I started working with a couple of roofing companies. Actually, I worked with All Area for quite some time. Still friends with them. And then Conti Roofing. And really, besides my uncle, all area, Conti. I worked for Vero Beach Roofing for a little bit, and then I figured out real quick that I needed to go get my license and start my own business, and then I did it.
Been off to
Still didn't know what I was doing.
Yeah. So is New York roofing different than Florida roofing?
Oh, hell yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, you could literally go to New York. We used to do 3 roofs a day. We were done with our first roof by 9 o'clock, like literally tore it off, put it back on. I had a crew of like 15 guys. That was when I first discovered illegal aliens as good labor. Oh. I started out with my buddies, but then they kept getting too drunk and fucked up, so like they never showed up or they were hungover. So then I ended up I had nobody to go to work with me one day, so I stopped at what they called the bodega. I stopped at the bodega, and the kid came up to my window, and he said, "Hi, I'm Frank, and I have a Honda Civic." And I was like, "Okay, Frank, get in." And then I was like, "So you've been roofing long?" He goes, "I'm Frank. I have a Honda Civic." And I was like, "You don't speak much English, huh?" He goes, "Nope." Smiled and looked, and I was like, all right, well, get in. So I taught that kid how to roof, and he was like my lead into all the other guys. And then, before I knew it, I had 15 Hondurans and MS-13 guys, El Salvador.
Mm-hmm.
And they were all MS-13, everyone. A little crazy. They were also my drug dealers too, but it was a good fit.
And also great at roofing, right?
Right.
Yeah.
So yeah, I mean, we used to do, we'd tear off a roof and be done by 9 o'clock, go to the next one. The first one paid for the labor, second one paid for the material, third one was supposed to be my money, but I usually gave it back to the guys for the other, stuff that they were bringing me.
Mm-hmm.
And then, then I moved back to Florida. Actually, I went down to New Orleans after the Hurricane Katrina.
Really?
That's when I got introduced to all area roofing. I went there and did a blue roof mission for them, for the government. And then, we all got screwed out of a bunch of money, and then Hurricane Wilma hit. We packed up, heading down there. So that was like my first like storm chasing type of stuff that I did. And then made some money, spent a bunch more than I made, and, struggled my way up.
Going through New York, Louisiana, Florida, all the different roofing and the companies, when you started your business, did you end up doing any storm chasing that you picked up that and you learned from them?
Well, see, yes, I did storm chasing. I didn't learn anything prior to doing the storm chasing.
Okay.
I figured out 2 things. I was really good at putting roofs on,
Mm-hmm.
and I was really good at selling roofs, right? So in my mind, I thought that selling a roof and doing a roof was pretty much like, that's it. You can sell it and you put it on. That's the whole thing. But there's actually a whole lot more to running a business than just selling a job and putting it on. Yes, the sale is the most important part of it. Being able to put it on is definitely important, but managing the business was not my forte. I didn't know that. So I did chase a storm, and we made a bunch of money. But in the meantime, I had somebody just robbing me blind the whole time while they were here. I was in the Keys, and money was just going out. I had nobody really watching my money.
Mm-hmm.
So I ended up going about $750,000 in debt, so I had to come back and work my way out of that. So
that is, a lesson that you learn. I have had similar, not $750,000 in debt, but yes, matter of fact, how I know you is I do roofs with Leak Busters Roofing, and you gave me the blueprint on how to sell them and also how to put them on. And I'm definitely better at the selling portion of it. I'm not going to lie, but you have a bunch of amazing guys who know how to put them on well. So that makes me look great. But yes, I've made a ton of money and sales and always been, blessed in sales. But you're right. There's so many different aspects. And Tiffany and I just had a conversation about that now, about really, having all those pieces of the pie to make the whole business function. Because yes, sales is the driving force. If you don't have sales, you don't have a business, period. There is no business.
Mm-hmm.
But if you don't have, the other pieces, the processes and the, in place, it does fail no matter how much you can sell.
Mm-hmm.
So, I learned that lesson as well. But then, you take it as a lesson and you move forward and you implement it into the business, and then you start seeing the profit and the growth and having the right people in place.
Just because you learn lessons doesn't mean that you don't make the same mistake twice. Sure.
Sure. Well, I think a big thing is that realizing your strengths. I actually learned this at Keller Williams, is that find what you're good at and drive it home, like really drive as hard as you can towards it. But you have to have the people that you're, not naturally good at, or part of your character of who you are in that place to pick those ends up, and that's what makes the whole thing function. If you're trying to fit a square peg in a round hole, banging your head, spending all the time at that, and you're missing your gift, then you really fall short. So finding those people is key. I think we've had conversations about that even in multiple businesses about bringing it in. I've seen a lot of key people come through your business who are super smart. You're pretty good at finding them, I've noticed.
Mm-hmm. I mean, well, the ability to be able to delegate things too is the biggest struggle point for most business owners. I did a lot of coaching on helping people grow and scale their companies. And like the biggest thing working with an owner is that when you are the best at sales and you are the best at putting, producing a product and everything else, it's hard to like give that to somebody else to do and let them, giving them the ability to fail. You're so worried about failing or losing money or losing a client or whatever that sometimes like the owners will hold it back, and that's what stunts a lot of the growth. Now, sometimes you got to be able to willing to accept that most people are only going to be about 70% as good as you. Then you got to also understand that there's going to be people that are going to be probably 100% better than you. And you got to work your way through the 70%ers to find 100% good people. And it's a struggle. I mean, there's a lot of good people out there, and there's a lot of really bad people out there. And you got to go through lots of people and lots of failures and everything else in order to get the good core people.
I find myself being a control freak in a lot of different areas where it holds you back. Being able to make that transition into trusting that person to run with it, even if it's not 100%, if it comes through at 80, 85%, that's still a win. Your percentage is good. Being able to transition into that guy versus in your mind, no one's going to do it as good as you. And because you have also that proven track record, you have that history of, achieving this, and this. With that, you touched on a little bit about the speaking that you do. Was roofing a piece of that, or was that something totally different, or how did that happen?
Yeah. Roofing's a part of everything that I've done since I was a kid. You know what I mean? It's just been my vehicle.
That's the core.
Yeah, it's just been my vehicle of who I am. The experiences I have are all because of roofing. It's been what I've made my money on. I never really wanted to be a speaker. I really still don't want to be a speaker. I do it because I think that my story is too big to play it small. And like that, if I don't like get out there and tell my story, I'm not going to be helping anybody. It's kind of selfish to not go out and at least tell your failures. A lot of people have trouble with speaking about their failures and stuff like that, but that's how everybody learns. That's where people get their knowledge and stuff like that. One of the coaching programs I did, I actually did pretty well with it because I was kind of stunted at, $3 million a year revenue stream, which they don't learn revenue is really not. That's the ego portion of thing. But I went from 3 million to 9 million, so they wanted me to tell my story on stage, and I did. And then I went to talk to my other friend, Bill Walsh, and I said, hey, I was on stage and I told my story, and I was actually helping sell some of the coaching packages with it, and just happened to make a shitload of money with that one time that I spoke on stage. I ended up selling a couple of the programs. So I was like, hey, I made this. And he said, wow, you should invest a little bit of money and learn how to really do it better and go to Platinum Speaker Camp. So I did. I invested the money, and then Bill Walsh taught me how to like frame my speech and really make a big impact when I go out there and speak and sell from stage. That's another thing to do, to learn how to speak in front of a crowd and actually sell. That's been a big game changer in everything I've done, because like now I could go speak to a whole entire, even at roofing, I can go to an HOA and I can present to 35 people at the HOA instead of just going to one person at a time. Now I have 35 chances of getting more work, and sometimes when we go in there, we do that, we close it down, we'll get 4, 5, 6 jobs at once. So you're telling the same story over and over and over again, but if you tell the same story to a lot of people, then it's more impactful, and you end up making more money. But the biggest thing is like being able to weave your story in there to help people go what they're going through and have them understand what you can do to get out of a situation. You know what I mean? Like I'm working on another chapter of my book right now. I took my eye off the ball a little bit and, ended up getting myself in some trouble. Not really trouble, but debt. You know what I mean? But I'm like rewriting the story about how to get out of this financial situation that would break most people. And I've just about got it figured out. But it's just, telling those stories is what helps other people overcome those stuff in their life too. So
I was watching a gentleman, and that's same with this podcast. It's hard for me to break out and do this. I think that it's so important to tell your story and get it out because it really helps people. And, I think, me, I'm a big God guy. And, I think, God puts purpose in us to help other people. And by telling it through your story, you can help other people. But where I was going with the gentleman, he says, what would you pay if you could, and I don't know who in your life, but I'm sure there's someone, your grandparents or your dad or whoever, what would you pay to have 10 hours of conversation even with that person? And, they're like, oh, it's priceless. It's priceless. And it's like when I've lost time with my son through, my failures and my addiction and how far I failed and money and lost, everything. And to push yourself into one, having these stories and having this for my son to see, to go back on to say, well, my dad really went out there and tried, and to present these stories for the people like, hey, I was a super successful, egotistical money real estate agent who lost everything, sitting in jail for a year, got out with nothing but Lambo feeties, I like to say, and didn't have a license, had to go to a local sports store to, get shoes and some pants and a shirt because I didn't even have any clothes or anything to fit. The day I got out to, me actually going to Marine Connection, my family, I love them to death. They brought me in and then reaching out to you on probation and asking, will you give me a chance? Hey, I'm on probation. I have to leave and go check in, but, I see you're doing well. And, then I learned about a story with you about, some troubles you had down in the Keys, and that, if you were able to overcome these things, and it was very motivational. So I think telling the story to help people, and I know a little bit about where you're at now in your journey, and I know you'll overcome it, and when you overcome these things, that story is going to be so inspirational and helpful to these other business owners who have fallen.
yeah.
And you are on your way. I love those conversations we have. And I think one of the ways that, roofing is king, and it's always there, but, you also have another opportunity for people through the insurance world.
Yeah.
And I think that was even through motivational speaking or a connection with roofing. It all, ties in somehow. Tell me a little bit about that.
Yeah, no, being out and being, speaking on stages and stuff, it does elevate you. Like I always say, you got to network from I don't always say it, I say it too, but Bill Walsh always says you got to network from the front of the room, not the back of the room, because if you're in the back of the room, you're not working. When you're on stage, you elevate your presence a little bit, not to be egotistical, but like more people notice who you are, and then you get more opportunities come to you through that. Because if you're just a guy sitting at the table in the back of the room trying to spray and pray your cards, nobody's really paying attention to you. But if you're on stage, everybody's like wants to know who you are and they want to be a part of what you got. I had a solar company that never really been a big fan of solar. One of my friends is a great leader, sales leader and everything else, decided to start a solar company, and they needed somebody really to be a roofing partner as a vertical. So then I ultimately invested into the solar company to be able to get more roofs and everything. And at the time, there was enough rebates and stuff, so it was actually kind of worth it. Now it's not. So, but anyways, this solar company really didn't take off. You know what I mean? We actually just dissolved it like last week, actually, to be honest with you. It was just we were doing one sale a month. It just wasn't feasible. Mm-hmm. But the same leader came to me with the opportunity of life insurance. At first I was just like, I already I went to a couple of the companies, PHP, and it just didn't make sense. The numbers didn't make sense to me, like the commission scale. None of it really made sense for the time and everything. And I bought life insurance, and the guy chased me down for probably about 6 weeks, had to come and get a bottle of piss, had to bring a nurse, do a blood test. And I'm thinking to myself, there's no way I have any kind of time for that. I don't have time to I'm not going to be doing house calls, and you know what I mean, with people like me that are just trying to avoid it at all costs. It just wasn't sexy. So he said, did you realize that it went digital? And I'm like, what do you mean? He goes, well, now you can do everything right from your phone. It's a 20-minute sale. And I'm like, well, no, I didn't know that, right? So then I talked to another kid that we know, mutual friend, and he'd been in it since September of last year. And at that time, he's only been in it for less than 90 days. He's showing me his bank statements. He's showing me, as we're sitting there talking for like an hour, he made over 120 grand the month before with a team of 32 people, 80 grand override from his team, 40 grand for, himself of his own personal pen, making the dials himself. And then as we're sitting there, I'm seeing, oh, there's another 16,000. Oh, there's 8,000. Oh, there's 2,400. Oh, and those are all called while he's hanging out with us, and we're sitting there eating lunch or dinner or whatever. And and his phone is just, he's got it set so it dings every time he makes money. And I'm like, so all you got to do is you just buy leads, you dial, you call, you close, boom, next, and you just keep on going. So I was like, oh wow, well, so what do I have to do? Like, there's got to be a catch somewhere. And oh well, you got to get a state license. Okay, great. You got to do a felony, FBI background check. Okay, all right, and then you got to buy leads. I'm like, and that's it. So totally getting involved in the business was less than, really it was like $450. Really is, I bought more states. I bought the license. You get license in the state that you live in, and then you buy the additional licenses. So I bought, maybe $1,500, another 15, 16 states or whatever, because I like to be able to dial across the time zones. You know what I mean? So
makes sense.
Like yesterday, I was like a fiend. I was dialing like crazy for like 8 hours, and then like 8:30, I'm still dialing here in Florida, and I'm thinking, man, that's probably a little bit late to be calling people about life insurance, So then I could just go start dialing Dallas. You know what I mean? I got myself another hour. I can go to California and start dialing another couple hours. So you buy it like that, but we're starting people out at 80% commission. Your average sale is, you're making anywhere from $900 to $1,500 on a, final expense lead, which is basically a final expense is like something the elderly gets, just a little bit of money to leave behind to cover their funeral expenses. Usually they get like $15,000 to $20,000 or $25,000 coverage. So if something happens, and their cost is usually, anywhere from $75 to $150, and the insurance company has realized that they pay you, they are willing to sacrifice 2 years of premium to acquire the customer. So they're banking on people not dying for 2 years. They pay you like 9 months up front. You make $1,000, you get $700 up front. And then on month 10, 11, 12, you get 100. And then on month 13, you get a renewal, which is not the same amount of money. It's like maybe another $100 every month for the renewal. Right. So then it's always month 13. So you're always, once you get to month 10, 11, 12, now you are out of the chargeback zone. The chargebacks are, if I sell you a policy and you cancel it 3 months down the road, then they take the whole 9 months of payback from me. Right. So I get $700 up front, and they got 3, so they're going to take $400 back. That's the bad part. But other than that, other than that is if you're not resilient and you don't want to dial, and you don't handle rejection very well, probably not a good business. But I like it. I have fun. I'm starting to record my calls. I had my whole family cracking up laughing last night because I'm dialing, and I'm just overcoming objections and getting hung up on, and I'm making fun of the people as they hang up on me. And I'm like,
the death benefit if someone passes and help with their burial and help their family, so they're not, having a burden of the financial piece of it.
GoFundMes.
Right.
You see GoFundMes all the time on Facebook.
All the time. Absolutely. Well, especially when it's, out of the blue, and people don't, that's the whole point, is if you're not prepared. I personally had an experience with my wife when we're getting married, because once at this stage when we're married, it's kind of like a business. So we had to look at where money was spent, some other money, and, the way to fix that for the paperwork we were doing was, if we get a life insurance policy to offset this money, if anything were to happen, if you have real estate and all these things. So it came in, and I've spoke with other people about that as well, that, a life insurance, if you have kids, and in our situation, when we got married, she had a son, I have a son, and, that we're all a family, we all love each other. But when you're coming into this, if someone passes, and how does the money change, and where your money and your house, and is the kids going to get it, and does it go to your wife or your son? And so you have all these tough conversations, and, life insurance was the piece of, okay, well, this money will go to my son, this money will go to you. And, it really relieved and helped, our marriage to move forward, and, the financial piece of it. But I know also that there's an investment aspect to it, because I've spoke about term and life, and then when in life, and you can draw against it, you can get in. I don't know if you can put IRAs in it. I don't know that much about it.
There's a bunch of different uses. Term is, what it sounds like. It's for a certain term of your life, 5, 10, 20 years. That's more like your mortgage protections and stuff like that. You would get a term policy. If you owe $200,000 on your mortgage, you want a $200,000 life insurance policy. Your mortgage is 10 years or 15 years or whatever. You get a term policy to cover that, right? So that's exactly what it is. It's term. You are banking on yourself dying. There's good reasons for having them if you're older or whatever, and if you can get a term policy, you figure you're only gonna live 20 years, then there's a death benefit. There's whole life insurance, which is what it sounds like for your whole life. You got it. You start paying, and at a certain point you don't have to pay anymore. You have the coverage for the rest of your life. But the newer thing that's came out in the last 10 or so years ago is the IUL, the Index Universal Life Insurance Policy. That right there is the sexiest machine as far as life insurance goes right now. It's based off of like the S&P, BlackRock, the stock market. You have a cap, and then you have a low, right? So the low will never go below zero. It's all in how you structure it, right? I have I just bought one for my son. It'll never go below 4% interest, right? So there's a cash value to it. You're making a payment, which is going to cover your death benefit, which is technically a term, okay? But not really. It's a whole life policy that you're paying for. So let's just say I put in, with a kid, a whole death benefit's only going to cost me like $30, right? And I get maybe $50,000 to $100,000 coverage, right? Then the other $120 is going to go towards the cash value. The cash value is then going to earn interest. So then it earns interest it could be up to 12 to 14%. Like right now they're cooking at like 12%, believe it or not, with all the wars and all the other stupid shit that's going on. Our life insurance policies are going crazy. The 401s are going good. And then what happens is if you structure these for the kids, this is really great for kids. It's really great for entrepreneurs that want like a forced savings account. Dave Ramsey always says, hey, get term and invest the difference instead of getting a whole life insurance policy. I don't necessarily agree with that, because what happens is, you can get more term coverage for less money, right? So you might get a policy for $50 for $500,000 or whatever the coverage is that you get. That difference, how many people do you think actually invest that money? Less than 5%. So it's a forced savings account. So you're actually forcing yourself to save it. I have $85,000 in mine just from making a payment every month for the last 5 years, right? I wouldn't have saved $85,000. That shit's in my account. I'm spending it, especially right now. I need $85,000. So it's a little bit harder for me to go to the bank and say, give me my $85,000 without penalties and everything else. So it's in there. It's forced. Mine is earning right now 8.5%. So it's cooking. But what then happens is for a kid, right? You start them out at like 5 years old, 4 years. Some people start them out. My buddy just wrote a policy for somebody, a 6-month-old baby. So when a kid decides, if they decide to go to college, which I don't recommend going to college at all unless you're going to be a doctor or a lawyer or something. But when they go to college, they can actually draw a paycheck. Basically, they'll take out $40,000 a year. You set it up so, okay, at the age 18 to 22, they're going to get $40,000 a year out of that. So that way they have money coming in so they don't have to work while they're going to school, right? And then once they get done with college, it goes back in and starts accumulating funds, and it accumulates funds the whole time anyway. You're just taking some of those funds out. You're withdrawing some of that cash so that way you have money to live. If you go into the hospital and you lose your wages at 35 years old for something, right? Okay, you don't have no paycheck, then you're going to be able to draw a salary out of the IUL. And then once you get older, 65, 66, 67, you'll start to draw some real serious cash value out of it. So you can be drawing $100,000 to $200,000 depending on how you structure it. It's all based on how much money you're putting in and everything else. So it has a living benefit, a death benefit, and a cash value. So then let's just say you don't draw any funds out of it. You're doing well in life. You already got money. You have all that money that's in there. It's accumulated a couple of $1 million. You die, you got $1 million benefit, right? So most people smart, the way I structured mine is I put everything into a trust, right? A non-revocable trust. And basically what happens is all the money goes into a trust. Now there's no probate period, none of that stuff. It's just my kids it goes right to my kids. They don't get the money, but they have access to it. if that makes sense. They can borrow against it. They don't ever have to go to a bank to try to get a loan. They have it's basically like a infinite banking system that you create for your family, and then they get it, and then their kids get it, and then it can just keep going on from generation to generations. I got first really intrigued by this, in about 2020. I read a book called What Would the Rockefellers Do? And it was about the Rockefellers and the Vanderbilts, the two biggest families. And the Vanderbilts, when they died, they let their kids have all the money. They went and bought, stupid shit mansions and partied and whatever. Now the Vanderbilts are, damn near broke. Well, the Rockefellers are like one of the most wealthiest families in the world because they never let their kids have the money. They let them borrow against the family funds. So the family funds always stayed there. And then they were able to borrow against it to start businesses. And it's exactly how I set mine up, is I have it in like an estate, and basically the kids have to like write a business plan in order to, they want to borrow $100,000. Great. Well, I have 5 trustees that have to look at it and then say, okay, yeah, this is a good plan. They're going to borrow $100,000. This is how he's going to pay it back. And this is how he's going to make money. And it just kind of protects that family wealth and that generational wealth. So I'm a big fan of it.
Yes. Well, is there any tax benefits to this?
IULs have tax benefits. Yeah, you can put the money in there. Now, there is MEC, the modified down contract, which means like if you got to be really careful how you do it. You can't put more money in than death benefit. Like it has to like balance out in a certain way, and then it's tax free. Some people use it as a tax vehicle, but they'll overfund the account, so to speak. Mm-hmm. Then it becomes taxed. Like then the MEC kicks in, and then it becomes. I got to be quiet. The IRS is across the hall. But yeah. So yes, and then it's tax-free withdrawals and everything like that. So you structure it correctly. You can set them up wrong. Like it's very easy to set these things up wrong if you don't really have the right guidance. I mean, being a newer agent and stuff like that, I have senior underwriters that like I'm not just going to be putting policies in without them looking at it and making sure that I'm not screwing somebody over. Mm-hmm. So, but yeah, most of the time, I have a whole life set up, and which is basically the same thing. It's a cash value contract. My money's pre-tax before it goes in. So when I get it back later on, or if I ever borrow it, it's always tax free. Anytime you take a loan, it's tax free. That's why most smart, rich people don't ever have to pay taxes, because they don't ever take cash. They borrow
against it, right?
They borrow against the assets, and then they never have to pay taxes on the money. So they could just
they meet their end. Pay taxes.
People think that's a bad thing, but it's really not.
Right.
So the more you're in debt, the less tax. I don't know about you, but my company did $9 million last year, and I don't have a big tax bill this year. Oh, again, I got to be careful.
It's tax season. I just went through mine. If you can, like an IRA or, and I guess also what you were saying is if you probably can put X amount into it before, and then if you overdraw into it, it's not a one and done tax solution. It's a small portion of what you should do. I mean, there's all the different things, the IRAs and 401ks and stuff like that. I mean, I'm not, I don't really know a whole lot about them, but I know you can put 5,000 in one, you could put 10,000 in another, you can put a certain amount in it. So this is just a one piece of your investment strategy and tax planning that you should do that will ultimately help you out in the end of your life or whatever. I know like 401ks, like I haven't got into that yet, but we're licensed to do annuities. And, what I'm starting to see is that the annuities are a lot better than the 401ks. So we're, a lot of people on my team are converting 401ks into annuities. Mm-hmm. The annuities basically, as you get to older age and you're not able to work anymore, you're basically putting away money that you'll have a paycheck when you retire. Right, it's amazing when you think about life insurance, like with the story that I said is, to help your family or to offset so they don't have the burden. But it's kind of turning into an industry of financial planning and an aspect. It's growing. Where is AI in this? Where is AI going to start writing these policies?
No. I don't think that AI. I mean, AI can help with it. AI is helping us. Like we use AI. Just found that we have a bot in our CRM that like when you have a question about something, it has the knowledge of some of the top producers in the company, and it can get me the answers. It can sort through we have multiple carriers, over 12, 13 carriers at the moment. It sorts through all the carriers to figure out what the best fit is for the client and stuff like that. But Ethos is an online platform that you can buy insurance without any human contact. Well, that's one of the best leads that I buy right now is Ethos Abandoned Cart, because what happens is Ethos figured out real quick that 93% of the people that go on there to buy a policy, they don't go through it at the end. I mean, think about this. Do you want to give an AI bot your social security number and your bank account information?
No, you're going to be hard pressed.
So this is a human interaction business. Like, most people don't want to put that information. I mean, there's some, don't get me wrong, there's still the 7% that put their information in that didn't think like, hey, I just gave my shit to AI. Like, who knows who's hacking into the AI that controls all of that stuff. So we're not predicting that. Like, I mean, yeah, maybe there'll be some sales made for it for sure. But as far as AI, I think we're using it, we're going to be using it for AI, for lead generation, for being more efficient with writing the policies and stuff like that. But you still have to have the human contact, especially when you're dealing with like final expense and the elderly and stuff like that. There's just too much that can go wrong. So I don't think it's ever going to be taken over by AI.
I feel the same way about real estate, and it's real estate kind of turns into a lot of financial planning and tax stuff. And when you have someone coming in, especially with retirement from up north, coming down to bring their money down, and they want to make the right decision, they're on fixed income. And, it's a lot of conversations have been brought up about AI and, is it going to take over? And I feel that the same way is that, people want to feel comfortable with who they're doing business with. They're not going to feel comfortable giving a social security number, or they're, in order to purchase a real estate property, you have to provide a bank account statement if you're paying cash of what your balance is. And
too much information.
You're just not going to feel comfortable doing it. And so I think it's so, it's moving so fast, but it's early stages. But me personally, I use AI to leverage my business, and there still will have that interaction you'll have to have for people to feel comfortable with you. But I think AI, if you're not using it to leverage it, you're going to have, you're not going to keep up. It's going to,
yes. I mean, if there was a way to sell roofs with only AI, I would have already figured it out. I've been messing with AI for 4 years. I consider myself pretty advanced in the AI space, because I was, before even ChatGPT was coming out, I was already like researching with stuff, and have a partner that has an AI company, and she was teaching me a ton of stuff already. But I'm starting to see even more now than ever that people are just so like over the AI. You know what I mean? Like, as far as like, they just don't trust it. A lot of people don't trust it. Mm-hmm. But you're absolutely correct as far as like running a business and being more efficient and working on the bottom line and, writing documents and writing contracts and doing all these different things. If you're not using it, if you're still spending an hour to try, I know guys that sit down and try to figure out an estimate for a roof, and, they'll sit there for an hour and a half, 2 hours trying to figure all the stuff out. Meanwhile, I'm over here like in 35 seconds telling AI what I need to do, what I have to do, and it spits out the most beautiful, detailed estimate you've ever seen. And, as I use it more and more for the last 5 years, that it's just gotten better and better at the pricing, and it's, pretty predictable what it's going to be. So stuff like that, I mean, being more efficient. If you're not using it to be efficient, then you're going to get left behind. That's for sure.
Definitely. With the efficiency. All right. So this was great. If you liked what you saw, please hit the subscribe button, like button. It says Realty Trader Talk Podcast, sponsored by realtytrader.com. Richie, you got anything on that? Yeah,
go follow Realty Trader. Follow me on Instagram, Real Richie Colletti. And you can find me, Richie Colletti, on pretty much any social media. I'm pretty consistent about keeping my name simple and all those different platforms.
Where else can they find anything about the insurance if they want to get more information about
Just hit me up on Instagram. We do opportunity calls in fact, tonight at 8 o'clock, every Tuesday night at 8 o'clock, we do an opportunity call. Zoom, jump on, tell you what it's all about. You can hit me up. I can have a private one-on-one with you. Like I said, just it's pretty easy. Got to take a state exam, maybe $150. I don't get no money from recruiting you. Only time I get paid is if you make a sale. Like, so I have no dog in the fight, by recruiting you. So we don't charge you. Some of these companies, like probably 90% of the other companies out there, I know I paid like $750 to join, a company as a recruiting fee, and guys get paid to recruit. We don't get paid unless you sell a policy. So we have a very big vested interest in making sure that if you're going to come in and waste space and suck up all of our oxygen, that we're gonna show you how to actually make some money. So you can make money, we can make money. It's the only way to do it. And right now we're about to take on some of the younger, hungrier entrepreneurs. We're setting up 2 call centers here, one in Bureau, one in Fort Pierce. We'll have training 24 hours a day for anybody that's interested in, making 6, 7, 8 figures a year.
Very cool. Very cool stuff. All right, guys.
Yep.